Ini adalah penampakan salah satu wilayah permukiman di Israel, tepatnya Rishon LeZion, setelah Iran meluncurkan serangan balasan.
Ketegangan di Timur Tengah kembali memuncak pagi.
Right now, as you're watching this video, emergency sirens are sounding across Israel, while diplomatic phones are ringing non-stop in capitals around the world. The Middle East has just witnessed one of its most serious escalations in years, and what happens next could reshape the entire region. If you think this is just another regional conflict that won't affect you, think again. The ripple effects of what's unfolding are already being felt in oil markets, stock exchanges, and government crisis rooms from Washington to Beijing. Here's the latest footage capturing today's sirens and explosions in Tel Aviv and Haifa. Listen to the intensity on the streets.
Israel says it used more than 200 warplanes hitting cities across Iran. Apart from Tehran, the attacks go as far west as Tabriz in central Iran and Shiraz in the south.
Let me break down exactly what happened in the last 72 hours because the mainstream media isn't giving you the full picture. Iranian missiles struck multiple Israeli cities, including Tel Aviv and Haifa, hitting residential buildings and critical infrastructure. But this isn't just about two countries exchanging fire. This represents a fundamental shift in how conflicts play out in the modern Middle East, and the implications go far beyond the immediate participants. We're looking at a crisis that could potentially draw in major world powers and reshape global alliances for the next decade. The numbers tell part of the story, but they don't capture the human drama unfolding right now. Israeli emergency services report at least 8 people killed and dozens injured, with entire apartment buildings damaged in areas where families were simply trying to live their daily lives. In Petah Tikva near Tel Aviv, residents describe the terrifying moments when missiles struck their neighborhood, shattering windows and leaving people trapped in damaged buildings. Meanwhile, in Haifa, one of Israel's most important ports, fires are still burning at a power plant, threatening critical infrastructure that serves hundreds of thousands of people. Watch this CCTV footage from Haifa showing a missile strike that punched through defenses and hit a residential zone. What makes this escalation particularly dangerous is the precision and scale of the attacks. These weren't random strikes or warning shots. Iranian missiles hit multiple strategic targets simultaneously, demonstrating a level of coordination and capability that has surprised many military analysts. The fact that these projectiles penetrated Israel's sophisticated air defense systems suggests either a saturation attack strategy or technological advances that have shifted the balance of power in the region. This has serious implications not just for Israel and Iran, but for every country that relies on defensive systems to protect their populations. But here's what most news outlets aren't explaining clearly. This current crisis didn't happen in a vacuum. It's the culmination of decades of escalating tensions that have been building through proxy conflicts, cyber warfare, and economic pressure. Iran's nuclear program, Israel's security concerns, competing spheres of influence in Syria and Lebanon, and the broader struggle for regional dominance have all contributed to this moment. Understanding this background is crucial because it shows us that quick fixes and temporary ceasefires aren't going to solve the underlying problems that keep bringing these two nations to the brink of war. The international response has been swift but predictable. World leaders are calling for de-escalation while simultaneously positioning their own countries to protect their interests in the region. The G7 meeting happening this week has been completely overshadowed by these events, with emergency sessions being called to address what many are describing as the most serious Middle East crisis in a generation. But behind the diplomatic statements and public calls for peace, there's a more complex game being played involving arms sales, energy security, and strategic partnerships that could determine the outcome of this conflict. What's particularly concerning is how this crisis intersects with other global challenges we're already facing. Energy markets are already volatile due to ongoing conflicts in Ukraine, and economic uncertainties worldwide. Now we have a new source of instability in a region that's crucial for global oil and gas supplies. The port of Haifa, which has been directly affected by the missile strikes, is a critical hub for Mediterranean trade routes. Any disruption to shipping and energy flows from this region will be felt in gas stations and grocery stores around the world within weeks. The humanitarian dimension of this crisis cannot be overlooked, even though it often gets lost in discussions about military strategy and geopolitics. Right now, there are families on both sides of this conflict who are dealing with loss, trauma, and uncertainty about their future. Children in Tel Aviv and Haifa are experiencing the terror of air raid sirens and explosions, while Iranian families are bracing for potential retaliation that could bring violence to their communities. The psychological impact of this kind of sustained threat creates lasting damage that affects entire generations. Emergency responders and medical personnel are working around the clock to treat not just physical injuries, but also the trauma that comes from living under constant threat of attack. Hospitals in affected areas are implementing emergency protocols while trying to maintain normal operations for patients with other medical needs. The strain on these systems demonstrates how quickly civilian infrastructure can become overwhelmed when conflicts escalate beyond the ability of existing emergency services to cope effectively. From a military perspective, what we're witnessing represents a significant evolution in Middle Eastern warfare. Both Iran and Israel possess sophisticated weapon systems and military technologies that were unimaginable even a decade ago. Iran's ballistic missile program has clearly advanced to the point where they can strike targets hundreds of miles away with considerable accuracy. Meanwhile, Israel's defensive capabilities, while among the world's most advanced, are being tested in ways that reveal both their strengths and potential vulnerabilities. The strategic calculations on both sides are complex and dangerous. Iran likely believes that demonstrating their missile capabilities will deter future Israeli strikes while showing their regional allies that they can project power beyond their borders. Israel, on the other hand, has built a security doctrine on the principle that threats must be addressed before they become existential dangers. This fundamental difference in approach makes it extremely difficult to find diplomatic solutions that satisfy both sides' core security concerns. Regional allies and neighbors are watching these developments with growing alarm because they understand that conflicts in the Middle East rarely stay contained. Countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Jordan, and others have their own security relationships with both the United States and regional powers that could force them to choose sides if this crisis continues to escalate. The potential for a wider regional war involving multiple countries and outside powers is real and growing with each exchange of fire. Economic implications are already becoming apparent as markets react to the uncertainty and potential for broader conflict. Oil prices are fluctuating based on fears that energy infrastructure could be targeted or that shipping routes could be disrupted. Defense contractors are seeing increased interest in their products as countries reassess their own security needs in light of the advanced weapons being deployed. Meanwhile, tourism and trade in the region are being affected as companies and individuals reconsider travel and business plans. The timing of this crisis is particularly challenging for international diplomacy because it comes at a moment when global attention and resources are already stretched thin by other conflicts and crises. Diplomatic capital that might normally be focused on Middle East peace initiatives is being diverted to Ukraine, tensions in the South China Sea, and domestic political challenges in major world capitals. This fragmentation of international attention makes it harder to mobilize the kind of sustained diplomatic effort that would be needed to address the root causes of this conflict. Looking ahead, several scenarios could unfold, none of them simple or easy. The best-case scenario involves rapid de-escalation through international mediation, followed by sustained diplomatic engagement to address underlying issues. However, the domestic political pressures on leaders in both countries make it difficult for them to be seen as backing down from confrontation. The worst-case scenario involves continued escalation that draws in regional allies and potentially global powers, creating a much larger and more dangerous conflict. What role can the international community play in preventing the worst outcomes? Sustained diplomatic pressure, humanitarian assistance for affected civilians, and creative approaches to addressing the security concerns of both sides will all be necessary. This includes everything from confidence-building measures and communication channels to prevent misunderstandings, to longer-term initiatives that address economic development and regional security cooperation. The information environment surrounding this crisis is also crucial to understand. Social media and instant communication mean that images, videos, and reports from the conflict zone spread globally within minutes. This can increase pressure on leaders to respond quickly rather than thoughtfully, and it can inflame public opinion in ways that make diplomatic solutions more difficult. As consumers of this information, we have a responsibility to seek out reliable sources and avoid amplifying content that could increase tensions or spread misinformation. For those of us watching from outside the region, it's important to remember that behind every headline and casualty statistic are real human beings whose lives have been forever changed by these events. The mother in Tel Aviv, whose apartment building was damaged, the emergency responder in Haifa, working through the night to help injured civilians, the families on both sides who are now living in fear of what tomorrow might bring. Their stories matter more than political calculations or military strategies. Moving forward, the focus must be on protecting innocent lives while creating space for diplomatic solutions. This means calling for immediate measures to protect civilians, supporting humanitarian organizations, providing aid to affected communities, and encouraging leaders to choose dialogue over further escalation. It also means staying informed about these developments while rejecting voices that promote hatred or division between communities. The stakes of this crisis extend far beyond the immediate participants. In an interconnected world, conflicts that seem distant can quickly affect energy prices, economic stability, and international security everywhere. The choices made by leaders in the coming days and weeks could determine whether this crisis becomes a catalyst for broader regional cooperation or a spark that ignites a much larger and more destructive conflict. The outcome will depend not just on military capabilities and political calculations, but on whether cooler heads can prevail and find ways to address legitimate security concerns through peaceful means. I know that some of you watching right now might disagree with this message. You might be typing a comment saying this is fear-mongering or that we're misinterpreting Scripture. Some of you might even be reaching for the unsubscribe button, believing this channel only tells lies or exaggerates world events. I respect your perspective. Truth-seeking should involve healthy discussion and even respectful disagreement. If you're skeptical, I invite you to share your thoughts respectfully in the comments. This channel isn't about forcing beliefs, but about examining world events through the lens of biblical prophecy. We may not always get everything right, but our commitment is to seek truth with integrity. If you found this analysis helpful, subscribe and share this video to help others understand the complexity of this developing situation. Let me know in the comments what questions you have about these events and how you think the international community should respond. Together we can stay informed and advocate for peaceful solutions to even the most challenging global conflicts.